Alright guys, how's it going? CES 2020 is underway, and the day before the official launch of the show saw both Intel and AMD take to various stages in order to talk about their upcoming products. And I was gearing up to cover AMD's presentation on the AdoredTV.com website via live blog when this landed in my Discord. Now, I've hidden the name of the author as there may have been some regret later as it was deleted from their Twitter feed. However, I think the frustration with Intel is apparent for anyone to see with. My brain is broken from this entirely. I love Intel, but WTF. And the reason for such dismay was this slide presented by Intel's performance strategy team. Higher performance mobile gaming for today. And I'll just zoom in and we can see that they have compared their own 6-core, 12-thread i7-9750H and their 8-core 16-thread i9-9980HK up against AMD's 4-core 8-thread Ryzen 7 3750H. The first thing to note about that is the 9980HK is a 45-watt chip, the 9750H is a 45-watt chip which can be configured down to 35 watts, and the 3750H is a 35-watt chip which may be configured down to 12 watts. And I noticed right at the bottom left here, see backup for configuration details. Sadly, I have no direct access to the materials, or I would have checked how exactly all these numbers came about. Obviously though, with 4 and 8 more threads per CPU, you would expect Intel to win handily in certain loads, though perhaps not anywhere near almost 3 times faster in gaming like we see here with, it's 3D Mark Time Spy CPU. Would this be another one of those synthetics that you don't like, Intel? Anyway, comparing CPUs like this wasn't the real story here. The story was, for the i7 and the R7, both of those setups were compared with an RTX 2060. And the claim was that both had the same boost. I don't know if one card was better than the other though, however I do know that for the i9 and its RTX 2080, that is for sure in an entirely different league when it comes to gaming. Matthew over at the website was quick to write up an article on it, and Intel's chief performance strategist Ryan Shrout was quick to clarify Intel's intent with this. The point was that the 9980HK and 2080 data point represents the pinnacle of mobile gaming performance, and that you can't even buy an AMD platform today with that class of GPU. It's spelled out clearly visually, not hiding anything, and the story was clear in person. Now Matthew's take on that was, the point is clearly understandable, but without this context that Ryan provided, which is not in this slide in question, it's still misleading. And even with the context, it's just a pointless benchmark. And also, Intel still could have shown just the two 2060 equipped laptops, which they actually did in the previous slide that we can see here, before adding the 2080 system. Had the 2080 system not been added, nothing would have been wrong. I believe Matthew's first point is most relevant. Without the context that Ryan provided on Twitter, this benchmark is simply misleading. And we saw that with the tweet that started this part of the video. The enthusiast who saw it, he didn't feel misled because enthusiasts can spot this kind of thing rather quickly. A non-enthusiast, however, will see this same benchmark and be misled. What we are really seeing being benchmarked here, it is not CPU versus CPU, like Intel would have us believe. This is a laptop versus a laptop benchmark, in which case the price of each, the battery life of each, TDPs, etc. That's irrelevant information here. And take a wild guess at just how much both of these Intel systems cost in comparison to the AMD one. This here, it is just marketing at its worst, but it's the kind that we've come to expect from Intel. I guarantee you that I could spend maybe a day or half a day testing and dissecting this slide here, and everything I find would be appalling. Like they've chosen DX11 for Civilization 6. I would not be at all surprised if doing that hindered the AMD setup, while choosing DX12 for Hitman did the same. Technically the information won't be false, however you don't need to lie to mislead. And maybe I'm just being unfair to Intel and their performance strategy team here. However, given their previous marketing misdemeanors, they simply do not get the benefit of doubt. If they want to be taken seriously, they need to repair their broken reputation in the eyes of the enthusiast community and the tech press, and this stuff is not the way to do it. And incidentally, neither is still refusing to comply with the FTC's 2010 order, which called on Intel to fully disclose that their benchmarks may be optimised only on Intel systems. As Matthew put it, ultimately, we just want to see honest benchmarking from Intel instead of data that serves no other purpose than to mislead consumers. Now, before I move on to AMD's presentation, something else was dropped on me just before it, and that was a quick look at the Xbox Series X processor revealed on Twitter. And here it is. As I suggested in the last video, it would be a pretty large chip, possibly around about 420 square millimeters. WCCF calculated it at 401 square millimeters based on this one shot. However, we've now got some updated shots from different angles, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit larger than that based on those. And I look forward to analysing it fully in future. But as I said, moving on to AMD for real. As always, AMD's CEO, Lisa Su, took to the stage first, talking about AMD's high-performance computing focus being on their products, their partners, and disruption, noting big tech bets and aggressive roadmaps deliver game-changing value propositions. Lisa also said that 2020 would be even bigger than 2019. However, looking at this slide of AMD's 2019 products, that will take some doing. Regarding partners, we see the usual suspects. All this stuff here is about AMD gaining legitimacy in the eyes of everyone. Remember, it wasn't so long ago that they had a very damaged reputation and one of being the budget brand, which is something that no company wants. The more of these big names they reel out on stage, the more legitimacy they gain in their new role as high-performance champions. And the easier it is to shake off that whole budget brand thing. Do you think of AMD as budget in any way today? I certainly don't. So it's clearly a winning strategy. Helped of course by actually great products like we saw in the previous slide, and perhaps somewhat less than value products, I'd suggest, given AMD's current pricing. But the presentation was off to a nice, snappy start with these videos, and Lisa soon moved on to detail what the disruption part of their ethos is. 2 new cores, Zen 2 and RDNA, the chiplet design, and 7nm. When you see it all laid out as simply as that, it's not difficult to see why they've taken over the high-end CPU space, at least. Possibly more interesting here though was the note on over 20 7nm products in 2020. Which again lines up quite nicely with my last video where I noted that AMD should be thinking of moving their entire portfolio onto the 7nm node. A large part of that move would be in laptops, which until this point for AMD has all been on the older 14 and 12nm nodes. And that is one reason why Intel can still compare themselves favourably in ways that we just saw. Given what we witnessed next, however, this is another advantage that Intel won't have for much longer, as Lisa announced that.
And so in 2020, we will be introducing the best laptop processor ever built.
The best, not AMD's best. Of course, this should not be a major surprise. 7nm is a massive performance per watt advantage for AMD, as Intel can only yield very small, low TDP parts, and are struggling with clock speeds on their own 10nm node, and so are still relying on these large 14nm chips like the 9980HK to compete in the high end of the laptop space. So to end the surprise, Lisa finally launched the AMD Ryzen 4000 series mobile processors, holding up this very small chip. In my last video, I suggested Renoir here would be around the 185 square millimeter mark, and that was based on my belief that it would only have 16 megabytes of L3 cache instead of the 32 megabytes that we see on Ryzen 3000. And I was also under the belief that the chip would have up to 13 Vega compute units instead of the current generation's 11 compute units. However, it turns out that my information was slightly out of date, as I was unaware of a later leak suggesting that Renoir had only 8MB of L3 and a reduction in graphics units to only 8. The result of that is an even smaller chip than I had imagined we'd see, and one that is quite aggressive from an area perspective. At a guess, we're looking at around 150 square millimeters, or even a little bit less. Regardless of exact size, it will be highly manufacturable and very good for AMD from a margin perspective. Let the benchmarking begin in earnest then. The first slide rather curiously shows the combined performance of Cinebench and 3D Mark 11 at 15 watts TDP and includes Intel and AMD performance. And looking at this, I think it's fairly clear that Intel is the blue diamond and AMD the red. Apparently, Ryzen 4000 makes an enormous jump in performance at the 15 watt level, however. Yeah, Cinebench and 3D Mark 11, let's just call those cherry picked. However, again, it will be a legitimate result. The main reason for this massive jump will be the doubling of cores from 4 in the 3000 mobile series to 8 in the 4000 mobile series. Again, due to the benefits of 7nm. Double the cores? That's a simple doubling of performance in Cinebench. Headlining the 15 watt U series is the Ryzen 7 4800U. With those 8 cores, 16 threads and 1.8 GHz base and up to 4.2 GHz boost, and the full 8 Vega compute units. Lisa then claimed a pretty amazing 59% performance increase in the Vega graphics cores. My guess there is what she means by that is core versus core. So 8 4000 series graphics cores are around 59% faster than 8 3000 series graphics cores. But of course, the 3000 series graphics cores go up to 11. So overall performance should not be 59% ahead. I dug up this slide later on with the full specs, and as we can see, the graphics frequency of the top end U part goes as far as 1750 MHz, which is a large increase over the previous generation, and that will be the main reason for the 59% performance jump. The next benchmark shown was, finally, a comparison of both companies' latest generations. AMD claims the 4800U is 4% faster in Cinebench R20 single thread, a ridiculous 90% faster in Cinebench R20 multi-thread, and 28% faster in 3D Mark Time Spy Extreme. And the Extreme benchmark will leverage the superior Vega graphics cores. Now, due to having double the cores, anything at all leveraging real multi-threading will show the new AMD chips in a very good light versus Intel's 4 cores. And this next slide is rather clear proof of that. As with any company's self-benchmarking, take it with a pinch of salt and wait on independent verification. The OEMs don't appear to need any convincing, however, and Lisa says there will be over 100 systems launching with the new chips throughout 2020. Lisa then took a break and introduced Laura Smith, who is Senior Director of the Radeon Technologies Group. To be blunt, this was my least favourite part of the presentation. As usual, we got a bunch of slides showing esports and AMD's tie-in with Fnatic. 1000 FreeSync displays on the market was a nice slide, though I wonder if AMD bothered to go back and check how many of those are now branded as G-Sync compatible instead. There are now also 3 levels of FreeSync. First is plain old FreeSync, stutter and tear free, which appears to be the only conditions. Second is a new one, FreeSync Premium, which presumably is still stutter and tear free, but now also requires 120Hz plus screens, including low frame rate compensation. And finally, it looks like FreeSync 2, which was a horribly unimaginative piece of branding, has been replaced by the barely better FreeSync Premium Pro branding. What are your marketers being paid for, RTG? FreeSync 2 has been around for over 2 years. This stuff is pathetic. But we waited for some big news on the graphics card front, and what we got was the RX 5600 XT. Some people were expecting a much faster card, and there had been some rumours of Big Navi doing the usual rounds. However, nothing I had heard had led me to believe that they'd be showing it soon. We didn't get many details, but it looked an awful lot like a 5700 non-XT. with a much lower clock and 192-bit memory bus. So it's basically the same Navi 10 GPU, just cut down further. Judging by the benchmarks they showed, it's a beat to the 1660 Ti at lowest effort part, at the same $279 price point that the Nvidia card launched a year ago. I think meh just about sums that one up. It wasn't the most comfortable presentation by Laura, who admittedly didn't have an awful lot to work with. Next up on stage was ex-Alienware General Manager Frank Azor, and it was time for yet more laptop talk. The stage was set by this 90+ million laptop gamers and creators slide, and we could figure out what was coming next. AMD's 4000U series are the 15-watt chips, but obviously there are more powerful laptop chips going up to 45 watts. And essentially what we have here is the same Renoir chip, but with higher clock speeds. AMD's claim of desktop caliber performance will be reviewed shortly. However, it is the same 8-core 16-thread chip, but this time with 2.9 GHz base and up to 4.2 GHz boost. Incidentally, the i9-9980HK that Intel benchmarked earlier, that has got a base frequency of 2.4 GHz. So the AMD part is 21% faster than that. However, at only 4.2 GHz boost, that is well down in the maximum boost of 5 GHz on the Intel part. Now, I have a real problem with what happened next and this claim of desktop caliber performance. In this gaming performance benchmark, we first got the mobile i7-9750H bar shown, then followed by the desktop i7-9700K bar, which showed 26% higher performance. That's fair enough. The higher TDP of the desktop part allows for higher clock speeds, which is where the performance gain comes from here. Where it all falls apart though is when AMD showed the Ryzen 7 4800H, their 45-watt mobile part beating both. Now I have no doubt that the 4800H will beat the 9750H in gaming or productivity, but the 9700K in gaming? Let's just take a quick look around to see how likely that is. If I go over to Guru 3D's Ryzen 7 3800X review, which is AMD's fastest 8-core part. 8-core 16 threads, 3.9 GHz base and up to 4.5 GHz boost. And if we compare it to the 9700K, so Shadow of the Tomb Raider 3800X beats the 9700K by 4 frames. Somewhat surprisingly perhaps. Let's see, Far Cry 5. 9700K on 131 frames wins by 8 frames over the 3800X. And in Deus Ex, the 9700K wins by a couple of frames. Now over at Hexus, the 9700K wins by 12 frames in Civilization 6, Gathering Storm. And now you know why Intel chose this benchmark. Total War 3 Kingdoms, which was another one Intel showed. The 9700K wins by 6 frames. World War Z, yes, Z, the 9700K wins by 6 frames again. Okay, so that is 1 win for the 3800X and 5 losses. The 3800X, AMD's fastest octa-core CPU. So how then can this mobile chip with much lower base clock and a lower boost clock now be this much faster than the 9700K in gaming? The answer is, just do what Intel do and cherry pick the best results you can find. Just as Intel benchmarked 3D Mark Firestrike physics and won at gaming by almost 2x with their 16-thread 9980HK versus AMD's 8-thread 3750H, AMD are now winning at gaming by having double the threads of the Intel part. This slide is just plainly misleading. Like the Intel slides, it's not false. In 3D Mark Firestrike Physics benchmark, cores and threads really make a huge difference. But this is not a typical gaming result. If I had to benchmark 100 games on a 9700K and on this 4800H, the 4800H would win maybe 3 or 4 out of those 100. This is not a benchmark of gaming. It's a benchmark of 3D Mark Firestrike Physics. Therefore, that is what should be shown in large bold letters at the top, not in smaller, thin type at the side. By doing it this way, AMD, you make yourselves no better than Intel and their performance strategy team. What's more, you lessen the likelihood that the tech press and enthusiasts will believe reasonable claims. Let's say, for example, this time next year, you show Zen 3 Mobile, which actually could be faster than Intel's desktop chips in real gaming. But we'll be less inclined to believe it because of this misleading nonsense. You have got plenty of advantages today. You don't need to fabricate stuff like this. But that was followed by a short viewing of the incoming Asus Zephyrus G14, which is coming in February and apparently will only be available with Ryzen. So something of a coup there for AMD. And actually, this is something that I had perhaps overlooked in the past. I had noted that Intel throws a lot of money at laptop guys, but to be honest, a lot of that money goes at the ultra-thin side of things, and less so at the high-end gaming side. The 9980H is a $583 processor, and it will not beat this 4800H in most tasks, including gaming I'd suggest, and AMD will be making the OEMs some decent offers on pricing, so it's possible, perhaps even likely, that we'll finally see AMD back at the real high end of the mobile market again, with cards like the RTX 2080. And Intel will have lost another benchmarking trick in the process. Next up for Frank was something AMD are calling Smart Shift, which at first viewing I mistakenly thought was about power management between the CPU and GPU cores on the mobile chip itself. However, on a follow-up viewing, it appears that the lessons AMD learned from managing power between CPU and the integrated GPU have now been applied to the CPU and discrete GPU, leading to around about a 10% performance gain in graphics performance, in the Division 2 benchmark at least. There wasn't a whole lot to go on, but I'm sure we'll hear more about this feature in future, especially if AMD's claims hold any water. It doesn't end with gaming though, as apparently AMD are also seeing up to 12% faster performance in Cinebench multi-threading with the same technology. Dell seem to be interested, and we'll be seeing Zen 2 and Navi in the same notebook in the second quarter from them. But enough of this mobile stuff, exciting as it is, and finally on to the big announcement this year, which was the 64-core Threadripper 3990X. This was no news to us, of course, as we're following this stuff closely. However, it was still fairly amusing to see the benchmark where Lisa had to show it over 3 screens due to the enormous lead AMD has over the 9900KS. They really should have shown the 1090XE in there just to keep themselves straight, but it's not like the overall picture would have changed much. And yes, we're seeing Cinebench R20 multi-thread, which is starting to get pretty old, AMD. What was perhaps more interesting to see was the 3990X's thumping win over dual Xeon Platinum 8280s, around 30% faster at a tiny fraction of the price, of $3,990 of course. Intel's top server chips are starting to look like rather expensive paperweights in comparison. There's the numbers, and it's almost like we're living in an exponential growth phase. Imagine you're in Intel's strategy department and faced with this coming in a month's time. What would you do? Overall, it was a decent presentation with few surprises. There was some talk of Big Navi and Zen 3, but I didn't expect any of that. They could have shown Zen 3 had they wanted to, but they've got no reason to. If you were realistic about it, then you wouldn't have been disappointed. And for me, I'd rate it as a 7.5 out of 10 presentation. But now for the final part of the video, a brief look at what Intel's main presentation revealed. And this will be brief because, to be frank, there was very little to talk about. Matthew and I also live blogged the event, and both of us could hardly wait until it had ended. The presentation started with some pre-recorded video, and I thought this was nicely done where the word intelligence pauses for a brief moment at Intel. Smart stuff there. Their CEO, Bob Swan, took to the stage and proceeded to talk a whole lot about nothing much in particular, though gave a nice nod to the thousands of people suffering due to the horrible situation with wildfires in Australia. There was a whole lot on AI, including a bit on cars and Mobileye. Navin Shenoy then took to the stage and talked a lot about nothing much. We got to see some new codec they developed in conjunction with Netflix, which appears to show a very good increase in quality at similar bitrate. Again, there was a lot of talk on AI, some athletes were paraded on stage, and it was instantly forgotten. What was cool, however, was when James Caruana, general manager of Intel Sports, whatever that is, came on stage and talked about volumetric video. What you do here is, you place cameras all around Stadia and capture images as 3D voxels rather than 2D pixels. And this allows the action to be captured from any perspective on the field. You probably figured that the hardware required to do this isn't something you'll find in a laptop or even a desktop. Nope, this requires cloud-based rendering, and the results are still somewhat hit and miss, as you can see from this demo they ran. It's great stuff though, really. What you're watching here was not taken from any specific camera around the field. It's a 3D image generated from data uploaded to the cloud and then run on hundreds of CPUs. This is probably the future of TV we're seeing right here. This ability to view the action from essentially any perspective. Again, there is no camera at this angle. This is an entirely generated image of the game. Yes, it's pixelated, it's a bit messy, but it's still extremely cool stuff. Intel says that they've got the speed portion figured out. This is 30 FPS, which is good enough for TV. However, the quality portion will probably require another 6x speed up in technology, which really isn't a lot when you put your minds to it. I enjoyed that part of the presentation more than most of it. Next up was Intel's General Manager of the Client Computing Group, Greg Bryant, and hopefully with him came some relevant PC news. I guess relevant depends on your own use cases. If you're a laptop fan, then you were served quite nicely, but for desktop fans, there was nothing. Literally nothing. In the entire presentation, we did not see one single desktop on display or in any of the videos shown. This entire line of laptops sitting on tables, not a single desktop. So perhaps unsurprisingly, Greg started talking about Project Athena, their multi-year innovation program for laptop form factors. We were then treated to a bunch of thin and light PCs with various gimmicks like removable keyboards. This final one though, the foldable horseshoe bend, that looked decent enough, but we'll see what kind of uptake on it there is at the OEM level. This here is basically what Athena is all about. Intel pumps a ton of money into the OEMs who build form factors around it, and obviously, with Intel providing the tiny chips and motherboards in such tiny form factors as we see with Lakefield and Tiger Lake, there's a nice vendor lock-in factor involved there too. It was all a bit predictable. And then things took a strange turn with the introduction of Adobe's principal worldwide evangelist, Jason Levine. We got some tech demos showing off some of Ice Lake's AI acceleration in Premiere Pro, but I'll be honest and tell you that I had mostly switched off by this point and had given up on seeing anything that I actually cared about. But then, much to Matthew's excitement, we eventually got a couple of things that might have been interesting. First up was this die shot of Tiger Lake, looking an awful lot like Ice Lake. And then Lisa Pierce, the VP of Intel Architecture, Graphics and Software, took to the stage to talk some more about it. First up was the promise of double the performance of the previous generation, which, as we all know, is no easy feat. We also got a demo of it running Warframe, but no details were given on its performance. However, it looked playable enough, probably at 720p. After that, we got some more demos of AI in action, showing some image processing, not unlike what we already saw on the Adobe part of the presentation. And then, finally, the first ever demo of Intel's long-awaited discrete gaming GPU, DG1. And I'll just let you see the entire thing.
And you can see, even though it's early, we're extremely excited about the gaming experience that we'll see on DG1.
That's right, and obviously more than just gaming too. For those more power mobile users in terms of doing content creation and other activities, it's going to be fantastic
Absolutely,
as well.
absolutely.
So thank you for staying on and also
Well,
showing
thanks.
us.
So that was it. Running Destiny 2 in mobile form factor, which hopefully explains why the frame rate looked a little bit choppy in places. But I think there might be more of a story to it than that. And that brought Intel's presentation to an end. As Matthew said later on the Patreon Discord, it was a solid 10 out of 10. 10 nanometers out of 10. But now to finish the video with Nvidia's presentation. Now that that's over with, Nvidia decided not to bother holding a presentation this CES, which should tell you all you need to know about their focus. I'll just finish for real with the usual summary of what just transpired. I don't think I've ever been less surprised by any two presentations than what I just witnessed. Everything was so predictable and there was literally nothing unexpected whatsoever. That doesn't necessarily mean it was bad, just expected. And as enthusiasts, that's the price we pay for being enthusiasts. Another price we pay for our enthusiasm is seeing the constant erosion of our own arena, the PC, the real PC. I'm talking about the desktop. When I see these companies harping on about mobile content creation, I could throw up. Who actually creates content on a mobile? I'm sitting here with 3 screens and still felt like it wasn't enough while live blogging last night. 8 cores, 16 threads? Sure, that's wonderful to see. But these attempts to replace the desktop with mobile aren't. Real power users, real gamers will game on PC. Sorry, I mean the desktop. The real PC. So it's not really surprising to see Intel resort to so many underhanded tactics when their desktop segment has been so neglected for so long. I do not envy Intel's performance strategy group. Given what they have to work with, it is an impossible task they face. With that said, I still won't be accepting what they do. AMD, on the other hand, sure, you can say they are simply doing what Intel did first, but there's no question stuff like this is really misleading to buyers. Regarding the actual tech, unless you've got a burning desire for a foldable ultramobile with mediocre performance, then AMD is the only viable choice today anyway, in any CPU market. So why do this stuff on top? Regarding GPU, well, I remain content that I basically gave up on it 3 years ago. I have heard from a good source that Big Navi could be a lot better than I am assuming though. If so, AMD needs to get it out fast, especially with Nvidia nowhere to be seen. But I'm done with this one, and hopefully we'll get some more positive news to talk about soon. In the meantime, as always, check out the website for our thoughts, some news, some reviews, and the odd scandal, more of which are surely coming your way before too long. I'll catch you later, guys.